Here's what's coming up on episode 79 of the Big Seance podcast. Theresa Cheung.
In my position, having the privilege to go to King's College, Cambridge, of all places, how I got there, I don't know. I'm so grateful. Has given me a credibility writing about this kind of thing that I might not have had. And it's enabled me to do things and approach people and have the paranormal taken seriously, which is what I want. Religion had its faults, but at least it provided a moral compass. And now that's gone, where do you go for your values? Where do you go for life advice now? You turn to the internet or your friends.
Google it.
Yeah, Google it, yeah. Not only is Jediism a beautiful religion, it encompasses all religions. It's basic spirit. I mean, the Force is basically spirit. But I'm going to collaborate with Daniel, who is the head of the Jedi Church here. And I'm going to be working with him to make all of America take its mind off what's happened with the election and get lightsabers and get the Force on their side. I think doubt's a path to heaven. I truly do. I truly do think that when you doubt, it's actually heaven calling you to grow. Because as soon as you say you know something, you're static. Heaven wants you to be you. And if you go to heaven, I think they will judge you not on how good you've been or how much you've followed this or what you've done. They will judge you on how true were you to you. Were you expressing the best that you can be?
Welcome to the Big Seance podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the seance. Hello, Paranerds. As I stated recently in the Big Seance Parlor on Facebook, one of the coolest things that happens when you have a podcast is the connections you begin making with listeners, guests, and all-around wise people. My connection with previous guest, medium Claire Broad, has led me to Theresa Cheung. She has such a beautiful energy, and I can't wait for you to hear her message in this episode today. As you'll hear her mention, her and Claire have paired up and are working on an upcoming book, which has me so very excited, and so I'll keep everyone updated on that project. Theresa mentioned several links and resources as well, and I've included all of those links at the bottom of the post for this episode at BigSeance.com, or you should be able to scroll down and find them right in your podcast app. Well, it's been a while since I've been in your ear, so I hope you enjoyed your Halloween and that you've recovered nicely. I know I needed definitely some rest and time off, so thank you for your patience during this brief hiatus. If you are mourning the passing of the Halloween season, and maybe you just aren't ready to let go of that spooky magic in the air, then Tim Prasil's Spectral Edition a little later will be a real treat for you. Tim says this is one of his favorites, and I actually hoped to air it in an additional episode leading up to Halloween, but I ran out of days and man-hours to make that one happen. Fortunately, you'll be able to enjoy it today. Also a little later, some listener feedback and a special shout-out. So here you go. Through the magic of podcasting, from all the way across the pond, Theresa Cheung joins me right here in the parlor. Have some tea. I'm so excited for you to hear my guest today. I'm talking to Theresa Cheung, and she was born into a family of spiritualists and studied theology and English at King's College, Cambridge University, before launching into a career in education and journalism and writing. She's been writing books about the psychic world for over 25 years now, some of which have gone on to become Sunday Times top 10 bestsellers. Some have been translated into 25 different languages, and her internationally best-selling Mind Spirit encyclopedias are still selling strongly. Yet she has never claimed to be a psychic or a medium, something I just learned late last night preparing for this. She is just an ordinary woman who has just had extraordinary experiences. Her most recent book was just released this month and is titled Heaven Called My Name, Incredible True Stories of Heavenly Encounters and the Afterlife. And there's, of course, more information about her background that could be found at her website, theresacheung.com, and that's CHEUNG, theresacheung.com. Good evening, Theresa. Welcome to the Big Seance Parlor. How are you, ma'am?
I'm very good. Good evening. Thank you very much for having me here. I'm very excited.
I'm very excited, too. And, of course, it's evening for you, but everybody else gets to hear my good morning voice. In my research for our chat today, I discovered several YouTube videos of you speaking at Watkins Books in London.
Oh, love Watkins. Yes.
And I've decided that I could listen to your voice all day.
Oh, thank you.
I'm not just referring to, your accent that we all love here in the U.S., but to hear you speak, to hear your passion, your honesty, it's very inspiring. So those are some cool videos. Those are just recent too, right?
Yes, one was this year. I mean, it did very well. The bookshop was packed. I was very humbled. I'd done a big promotion for it because prior to that, I'd had the science team at IONS, the Institute of Noetic Science, on my Facebook page. And the reaction in the UK had been amazing because a lot of my readers simply don't know the science behind what I write about. They all think it's a matter of belief. And I was just trying to show them that there is science. There are really great scientists. I mean, the scientists that came on my page, Dr. Arnold DeLorme, I mean, my goodness, Dr. Dean Radin, Dr. Julia Mossbridge, legends, Dr. Helena Warmay, Dr. Gareth Yon, I mean, really. And they spoke for 2 minutes about the research they were doing and how it was proving the paranormal and proving some of the stories in my book that all these years have just recorded. I've become like a database. People write to me, I write to them back. And I wanted to give them something to say, look, there's something there. There's more to this than just belief. There are scientists investigating this, and the overwhelming conclusion they come to is there is something to this. A lot of it is fraudulent. They can't prove. However, the great majority, they're now finding that this belief that we are separate, our spirit is separate from our body, and it's just fascinating. I think it's the most fascinating thing in the world, and I can't understand why everybody else isn't. I mean, the meaning of our existence, but that's me. It's my life.
Yeah. Well, we have a mutual friend who has been a previous guest on the podcast, and that is medium Claire Broad, who we all love here.
Oh, yes. I'm co-authoring the next book with her. Yes.
I just heard about it. She told me that a few days ago, and that makes me so excited. And, she's how I got connected with you and your work.
She's lovely.
And I've also interviewed and have become friends with Marion Hover from the UK. And like you, she grew up in the Spiritualist church. And I'm fascinated by this new spiritualist movement happening where you are. And I'd love to hear about how growing up a spiritualist has influenced your work and led to, who you are today and your views of all things spiritual today.
Well, if you grow up like that, you are kind of indoctrinated. You grow up just accepting heaven is real. I grew up around people who could see dead people, talk to them. I never inherited that gift, although actually I now begin to think that I did. I just wasn't aware of it. My intuition was very strong. So I just grew up thinking it was normal. Of course, it isn't when you go into the world. A lot of people think you're completely crazy. And that's why I feel so blessed that in my position, having the privilege to go to King's College, Cambridge, of all places, how I got there, I don't know. I'm so grateful, has given me a credibility writing about this kind of thing that I might not have had. And it's enabled me to do things and approach people and have the paranormal taken seriously, which is what I want. And that's why I've teamed up with Claire as well, because I went to her demonstrations and she is just so normal about it. And sometimes she admits, I'm going to get this wrong. I got this wrong, didn't I? And it is, but she normalizes it. And I'm sure you found that when you spoke to her. And I immediately thought, we've got to get, this woman has got to tell her story, because her story is fascinating. Combine her with me and my experience. I think the two of us are going to try and take the UK, possibly the world, by storm and stop all this stupidity around the paranormal and spirituality, that so many people are frightened of it. Goodness knows why. There's nothing to be frightened of it, or they try to debunk it all the time. And why? It's just a belief that's not harming anyone. And the criticism that psychics, mediums, people who believe this get. And I want to be a voice to try and present the other side and try and get dialogue going. And on my page, which now, this morning it went over 90,000 page likes.
Wow.
Unbelievable. I'm not a media presence. I'm just an author. And how that's happening, that has to be heaven sent, because it's a platform for people to just talk about this. And whenever people come on there and say you're damned or you're wrong, we just say thank you for your perspective and please try and explain that. And then it's great, because sometimes we get into a dialogue and sometimes we agree to differ on the page, which I think is wonderful. But it's just talking about it and removing the fear, because I think the paranormal is normal. For me, it's normal. If that makes sense. It's normal. It's nothing to be frightened of. Your sixth sense is like all your other senses. It's just something in the modern age we haven't developed. And the same with life after death. I have had too much. I've read too much research, talked to too many scientists now, read so many stories to be almost beyond all doubt. I never will say I'm completely beyond doubt, because I don't know. I could be wrong. I admit that. However, I look at the evidence that is out there for survival. And there's so much scientific evidence also that we're not hearing about, and we should be. And that's why I did what I did with the scientists on my page, bringing them on, because I wanted the world to know about it. There is so much brilliant research, but it's being pushed aside because it challenges everything. Because just imagine if it was proved that our mind is transcendent. Every scientific idea would be out of the window. It's too frightening, I think, for the establishment. So, it's just important people know about it. That's all.
Yeah. Comparing your background and my background, I just think it's funny, you're talking about how it's always just been normal for you. And,
Yes.
For myself, I grew up Southern Baptist and very the opposite. And so I very much have to kind of rewire my brain, to get this normal sense of the paranormal.
Yeah. You're not no longer. Are you still?
No.
No. Lapsed.
Yes.
Well, I wanted to be a nun. I experimented with that. I can totally understand that. It's the search for meaning, isn't it? That's what it is, religion. But I began to see that spirituality is so much bigger than religion. It encompasses all religions, and I think there's nothing wrong with being religious if it gives you a sense of meaning and you harm no one. That's what I always say. But I'm now looking at the bigger picture, and that's what my page is all about. It's all about, if we are spiritual beings having a human experience, that means that we take better care of each other and we view this life in a totally different way, and in a kinder, gentler way.
Well, have you made any observations about maybe the differences between spiritual views currently in the UK and other parts of the world, such as here in the US? Because I don't maybe understand the difference, but I can sometimes tell, like if I'm, as I get to know psychics and mediums in the UK, and hear how they're speaking, and it just seems a little different. Like I don't see a spiritualist movement here now, in the US, but I see one there, and it may be just kind of some filter that I'm seeing things through.
It is. I mean, the UK is very cynical, and that's what I've had to struggle against all this time. I mean, I have my readership, but it's a niche readership. And that's why until a few years ago, I kind of stayed an invisible writer, because there was not much point, because you would be shot down, and they usually try to label you. Like whenever the newspapers came round to take a photograph of me, they wanted my cats there, or a crystal ball, or something like that, to put you in that mad female category, which, there is a lot of cynicism here, actually. However, it is starting to gently shift. I am noticing it. As I say, people like Claire, people that I'm working with currently on my page, who are all helping and supporting me, because it's not just run by me. There are now a whole lot of people posting on there. I'm beginning to notice a change. And people are interested, because even the people who condemn it, they're fascinated to know what I'm going to say. But yeah, the UK, there are pockets, areas of interest, but still there is a lot of cynicism here. And if I am asked on a radio show or whatever, they would typically get somebody there to shoot me down. I'm aware of that. And I'm getting better and better, actually, as sometimes, I think that it's not rising to the bait. I mean, my perception is that in the US is more generous, because my Element encyclopedias, for example, I mean, they've sold so well in the US, whereas they didn't here. I mean, they were huge in the US. I mean, Barnes & Noble got its own edition, and I get a massive amount of mail about my encyclopedias, 20,000 Dreams and the Psychic World, which has sort of become little classics. They were written 10 years ago now, but they're still, much loved. And I feel that the US readers, my thing with the US is religion comes into it more. That people in the US, they love my message if I stay inside the acceptability of their religion. If I step outside that and say something that isn't within their religion, then I'm damned, and and I'm going to hell or whatever. That's not so pleasant part of it. But the country actually where most open mind is Italy. A lot of my Italian readers are very, very open to this, and I think there's a big movement in Italy at the moment. And dare I say it, Russia and Poland. There's a big openness, actually, maybe because their countries at the moment are in such crisis that people are looking for answers elsewhere. But they're less defined by religion there, and much more willing to be open to a new way of thinking. But has that been your experience in America then?
Well, after talking to, now you and Claire and Marion, I guess I've just kind of gotten it wrong. I had no clue that there was this big skeptical kind of attack on, spiritual paranormal work. And I guess I just see there's so much more. In my mind, there was so much more spiritual and psychic things going on over there. And then
mind, body, spirit affairs and everything. But unfortunately, that does attract a lot of people who are just in it for the money and all the. Of course, we all have to earn a living, but there are a lot of people who do bring the what we're trying to say. In I despair sometimes, because you think this is just rubbish. There are lots of spiritualist meetings, demonstrations, public ones. Yeah, we do have that. But there is also the science here is very big. Richard Dawkins, there's a whole strong atheist movement, and both Claire and I have experienced that the atheists, it's almost like they're going to target us. And for a while, when my page was growing in popularity, because I've only been online for 2 years. And I was starting to bring out this message that we suddenly got this attack. Relentless it was. I mean, they've left us alone now. I think they just think, we'll leave them. But I think that was definitely coming from the UK. I know it was. But as I said, my mission is to make it more mainstream. And I'm hoping that by bringing Claire into the limelight, because she's been working for 20 years quietly, every Sunday doing readings, not any high profile, because she's concerned that if she becomes too well known, that she'll lose her mediumistic gifts. And I think that actually happens to a lot of psychics and mediums. They start right, but then the pressures of you suddenly become really famous, like the famous mediums, the pressure to perform, and there's a lot of money on it, it can compromise their abilities. So, but I think it's time for her, because I think you've spoken to her, that she's very eloquent and good at presenting this message. And whenever I put her on my page, because she releases videos on my page, people can't believe she's a medium because they want to see this crazy person there.
She's so down to earth.
Yeah, I'm going to get her to tell her story. It's her first book, so I'm guiding her through the process at the moment. So that's increasingly what I'm doing now. I'm doing collaborations because literally, I've written over 100 books. There's only so much the world can take of Theresa Cheung. And publishers, in a way, it's frustrating because all they want me to do is reinvent the wheel with every book. That's another struggle I had. So that's why I'm so delighted this time they've let me bring in a medium, because what they know with me is Afterlife story collections. So it's my readers. They write in, and I select stories that I know are going to strike a chord. I write back, say, can I use it? Then we edit it, and I do a connecting narrative. I have done so many Angel Called Me, Heaven Saved Me, Angel Held My Hand books now, that I'm actually probably bringing out books that compete against my own backlist. I think it's overcrowded now, that market. We've done the Heavenly Story collections. I wanted to evolve that. And that's why I brought in all the scientists. And Ions has actually given me my own landing page, which was such a gift, that noetic.org/Theresa/Cheung, that my readers can go on and get 3 free gifts from Dean Radin, Julia Mossbridge, and some nature soundscapes. That for me was a step forward, because I felt that, I'd written these big encyclopedias, got the message out there, but it's all anecdotal. I have to move this forward, because, I could for the rest of my life put out a book a year, but what's the point of that? It's been done. I wanted to move it forward. And that's why I thought to have this collaboration with Claire, because she is the real deal. I'm not saying I'm a fraud, but because I'm not a medium like she is, I'm intuitive, but I couldn't stand up there and give messages. If you've ever seen these demonstrations, the courage these people have, and they do it for no money every week. They stand up in front of a room of people and bring healing and messages from the other side. And they don't do it for money or fame. They do it because it's their calling. I thought it's time someone like that gets noticed, and I'm hoping it will really become a talking point. And the other thing, you're going to laugh, the other collaboration I'm doing next year is with the head of the Jedi Church in the UK. Mm-hmm. You're nodding. Mm-hmm.
And I remember I remember hearing you mention that in one of the videos too. You were very excited about that.
Yeah, very, very excited, because for me, not only is Jediism a beautiful religion, it encompasses all religions. It's basic spirit. The Force is basically spirit. But I'm going to collaborate with Daniel, who is the head of the Jedi Church here, and has had massive media coverage, actually. He's been in Time magazine, Guardian, Telegraph, BBC Breakfast, and he has actually created a religion out of Jediism. And I'm going to be working with him to make all of America take its mind off what's happened with the election and get lightsabers and get the Force on their side. That's what we're doing. We're just going to move ahead with that now. It's released next September for the final Star Wars movie. It's going to be a book of scripture for the Jedi Church, which has close to 1 million followers now already. And I think it's people who are just disillusioned with religion, but they still need that structure. And what Jediism does, it makes all the things religions are lacking. It makes it exciting, and it makes it fun. It's fun being who wouldn't you want to be a Master Jedi?
Well, I have to tell you, I did not grow up, not for a dislike of it really, but I did not grow up a Star Wars nerd. But no! I would be so excited to get my own lightsaber if that's what, if that's what that movement meant.
We have to be aware that, it's a huge franchise. So a lot of it is making sure that we don't offend Disney or anything. So that is the complication with the book, is to produce this movement that is a kind of a tribute, because it's inspired by Star Wars, but it also brings in Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, spiritualism. Star Wars is a kind of a sacred text, a symbolic text, but it's much more than that. So this is my new way as well. And you probably think I completely lost the plot, but I know that if we want to reach people, ordinary people, we want to engage them, they're not going to be engaged by something that doesn't excite them. And whenever I talk about this book coming out about the Jedi, everybody wants to hear it. The media picks up it, and I don't care. That's the hook, that we can come in with the real message, because doing it in this earnest way of, some writer collecting worthy stories, or even in a way presenting the scientists now and their great studies, it's not capturing people in a big way and bringing this message of eternal life that we're trying to bring. And so I'm just trying to do it in a way that will become a big talking point online and in life, for people to talk about what really matters in this life, because we don't talk about what matters enough. And that's what my goal is now. And that's why I'm moving from writing on my own, because I've written too many books. I'm very, very lucky. I don't know how. I'm blessed. I'm really, really blessed. But I can't keep writing the same book. I try and make each of my books unique in their way. They tell different aspects of my life, and I bring in other people's stories, and I do interviews. I've got James Van Praagh in my new book. He did an interview with me, which is a fascinating interview. It's this one here. He was a lovely guy. But I need to move it forward. I feel called to do that. And Claire does as well, actually. Mm-hmm. She feels very much called. So the two of us watch this space.
I'm telling you, I'm on pins and needles waiting for all of those collaborations. It sounds amazing. But speaking of being on a mission to get a message out there and reaching people and doing it in a big way, we've got this millennial crowd that everybody keeps talking about. Is the millennial term used a lot in the UK as well?
Not at all. No, it's not something that I've heard in my circles. No.
Well, people toss that word around a lot over here, and many times it's meant as an insult. That we've got all these young people walking around, addicted to their phones and their devices, and they expect things rather than earning things, and all this attitude. Do you think this crowd, young people of today, are they naturally more in tune with spiritual ideas than previous generations, or is it the opposite?
I think they're more in tune, actually, because I've had some wonderful, wonderful letters and messages from young people, and they are willing to suspend disbelief, and they tend to be quite fluid. And that's my one thing, is that they're so fluid that they've got nothing. It's too much. In some ways, I'd like a bit more structure in their lives. That's this generation right now. I find them so fluid, and it's almost like they've anything, it's, but I suppose that's what I'm doing with the Jedi thing. That will tap into young people. They will get that, whereas they might not get what I'm talking about, because what I talk about often draws greatly on life experience and maturity, which of course they haven't got. Because I tend to look, because young people are so grown up now. You must find that now. I look at 15-year-olds, and I remember myself as a 15-year-old. I was so green, and they just seem so. They've grown up with mobile phones. I remember the time when waiting for the library a book for 6 weeks, or there's no internet, and to grow up with because basically they hold the world in their hands, don't they? It's a miracle. An absolute miracle that they can find out anything. Because for me, when I was growing up, I was always trying to find out knowledge or learn about religions. And then you had to go and find an expert or a teacher. And then that was dependent on whether the teacher knew what they were talking about. And the same going to Cambridge, is like which professor had the knowledge. But now you can just, some of the knowledge may not be accurate, but it's there. You can see the world, you can experience it on your phone. And growing up like that, how that's impacted this young generation, because they're the first generation, aren't they, to grow up totally with online.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is something that I don't know how to cope with, really, how that's going to impact them, because they're very wise, but not. Young people, they're very, very wise, but not. Because I sort of had to go through all these awkward things that all of that's removed from them, because on the phone it tells them what to do. This is me, you have to learn through experience, but now there's all these guides and self-help things online. And so young people, in one way, I think they're incredibly wise now, and have got so much knowledge. But on the other hand, what's lacking is they don't have the experience. They need to live through some of these things. And I worry that they're going to have half-lives, that they won't live through things because the internet takes all that away from them. But religion had its faults, but at least it provided a moral compass. And now that's gone. Where do you go for your values? Where do you go for life advice now? You turn to the internet or your friends.
You Google it.
And yeah, Google it. Yeah. You're right. So I'm just trying to come in with a different message, say that there's something higher here. Spirit. That's the abiding message of our page, that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and that can give you a shift in perspective. So I don't know. You're asking me so many questions. I feel I should know, but then of course I don't know the answers.
I don't think any of us know. I work with them every day and I don't know. Well, let's get back to some science here. Yes. I speak openly about my frustrations with typically being 50% believer and 50% skeptic. And, even when I do my research, I say research like I'm this big researcher, but when I've done experimenting or when I was in paranormal research doing more of that, I really want everything to be paranormal, but yet I talk myself down that it's not. And especially when it comes to spirit communication and things like that, I'm obsessed with it, yet I constantly am arguing with myself. And you've talked about your belief in heaven, but also doubt when it comes to that.
Yes. I think doubt's a path to heaven. I truly do. I truly do think that when you doubt, it's actually heaven calling you to grow. Because as soon as you say you know something, you're static. No, knowledge, actually knowing everything, knowing all the answers, there's no more journeying, there's no more struggle. Doubt is about wanting you to grow and add more knowledge, find out more about yourself. So I actually think doubt, the most spirit. Have you read Mother Teresa?
Mm-hmm.
She was the dark night of the soul. She doubted constantly. And usually the most spiritual people in the world are the ones plagued with the most doubt, because they're the ones who want to grow most. So I think of doubt as a calling card, just basically heaven saying, you don't know all the answers, find out more, learn and grow. And I think if you do come to a time when you actually know everything, you'll be dead. That's it. It's not life. That will never happen. Doubt is essential for you to grow and evolve. That's what I believe. It truly is. Just as sadly, suffering is something that this happens in this world as well, that seems to be an essential requirement for us to understand true empathy. But no, doubt is heaven calling you to grow a bit more. If you think of it like that, have a perspective shift, that it's actually the mark of a truly spiritual, humble person. I have never met any spiritual person who is 100% convinced, and if they are, I wouldn't believe them.
Well, can you, and I asked this of a lot of people just because it's an obsession for me. I've read a lot of books by psychics and mediums, and I'm always trying to figure out what they think the other side is and looks like, and kind of what the picture of the other side, what the painting looks like. Do you have this picture after all the, people that write into you and all of your work? What do you think it looks like, and what is it?
basically what I found, the people who write into me and have had near-death experiences, and my mother had one of those as well, it's basically heaven is what you believe it to be. You are basically, right now, we're all creating heaven with our thoughts. It's what we actually, there is no set. I mean, there's some standard, typical, lakes and streams and angels and all that, but that's only because that's your idea of heaven. But what I found, that people who have died and gone to heaven, the places they've gone have been very much places that of their thoughts create and that their thoughts bring them to. There is no, this is what heaven looks like. One mother wrote in, say that her daughter who had a near-death experience said that the flowers were singing in heaven. I mean, heaven is that kind of thing where everything is different. But I think everybody, the heaven they go to is one that they are creating with their life on earth. That's what I think. And that's why it's so important to control the negativity, because that, in a way, you are creating your own hell with that too. Because, you can ask, if heaven exists, hell has to as well. And I do think that when people go to the other side who've done terrible things, they will experience the suffering that they've caused others. I've spoken to mediums about that as well. They get to feel how they've impacted others. And that's something fascinating that people tell me who've died and gone to heaven, that when they go to heaven, they are aware of how their every thought and action impacted others, right down to the person they bought a newspaper from. And it's too difficult for our human minds to comprehend because it's so huge, but every moment in their life, they're creating what they will go to on the other side. And that is a truly humbling and kind of a scary thought, really. And it is great responsibility with your thoughts and your deeds, that's what you're going to go to. However, people shouldn't think that they've got to be perfect. I don't think actually heaven is perfection. Heaven is growing and learning. That is heaven, because we are here to learn and to grow. And there's nothing wrong with making mistakes, because hell, how else are you going to grow? How else are you going to know?
Mm-hmm.
And then when you see someone else making a mistake, maybe then you can come and say, hey, I've been there. I mean, I know the best advice I've given to people is when I've actually lived through it. But when they come to me with something they've done wrong that I haven't actually done, it's very hard for me to be there and know and understand. Now, I'm not condoning being evil or wrong. However, what I'm saying is that it is all learning and a journey of our spirit to try and grow into the highest form of ourselves. Because I think we're constantly doing that. Every day we're constantly learning, growing. Every day there's a new aspect of ourselves being born. But it's just too huge for us to comprehend. And I think our human brains shut all that out. But in sleep, dreams, I've written extensively about dreams. My 20,000 Dreams is a huge 400,000 word tome. Dreams are one way as well, where we connect with the other side. Always pay attention to your dreams, even the ones that seem inconsequential. They are messages, unconscious, symbolic messages for you to work with. But I'm not saying life is easy. I mean, everybody thinks that if you believe this, that, and the other, your life is easy. It's not. Life is hard, and I do actually think life is meant to be hard. Because, I mean, if we all just came here and had a great time, where's the challenge in that?
Right.
and same with the depression, doubt. I always think of depression as the curse of the strong. That's what I said. The strongest people get depression because they're the people that think very, very deeply about life. And when you do that, you're going to get it because all the doubts are going to come. Say like the work you do, you can't do the kind of interviews you do without thinking really deeply about the meaning of life. And a lot of people, that's too much. They'd much rather just go shopping or hang out with their friends or do all the things that are fun and nice. But if you're going to go and delve into the deep meaning of life, I think depression is almost comes with that, because it's going to be seen so huge and so hopeless sometimes that you're just going to think, well, what's the point? But there is point. The point is for us to just grow and evolve into the highest and most beautiful expression of ourselves. And I think that's eternal. I don't think it ever stops. Mm-hmm. Although Claire made me laugh. She thinks, oh my goodness, I don't really want to be eternal. I'm boring myself already.
I've had that thought too, because you think of it in terms of how your body and everything now. Yeah, I wouldn't want that either.
But I think we become part of this universal spirit force when we die. I mean, I don't know whether it becomes part of this collective where we are like drops in the ocean. That's how I see it. And I spoke to Eben Alexander as well about his near-death experience, because I did a video on the page as well, and that's how he perceived it. But in his near-death experience, and I know there has been criticism of him, but I found him very convincing. He said he went through swamps on the other side, darkness, and it was terrifying, that there was that there too. But he was able to see a glimpse of something so amazing where it all made sense. A bit like the top of a tapestry, where the underside is all the embroidery. That's this earth, because we don't know why there's a loose end or a knot. And then you turn it over and there's the picture. It makes sense. So that's what I think heaven is like. It will suddenly make sense. All the things that we don't think make sense.
And with Eben, it was his mind that took him out of that swamp, right? It was kind of what he chose to think about.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. What he chose to think about. It is shift your perception. And that's why these great sci-fi movies like Star Wars, The Matrix, that's why they are so popular. It's not just because they're great fun. It's because there's this underlying spiritual concept behind it, that you can create your own reality to a certain extent. Of course, you could say, well, where was that reality in the Holocaust for the Jews? But sometimes the collective thought of a country is so strong that an individual can't overcome that. There are some situations in life, where it's just impossible, a baby dying or whatever. But that's extreme. In your daily life, you can, in some ways, create your reality with your thoughts. And I've seen that happen in my own life as well. 3 or 4 years ago, because my children were getting close to teenage, I wanted to do something with my writing. I mean, I'd reached Sunday Times bestselling status, been there, done that, been great, had the recognition, but it wasn't. I wanted I had this vision of going online and getting it a talking point. And everybody said, oh, don't bother. I mean, look at me, my age, I'm in the UK. And yet I had this vision. I saw it. And there were times along the way when I thought, this is never getting anywhere, when my page was on like 212 likes, and great feature, and, nobody comments. And then suddenly, I think if you think something and you want it enough, and then suddenly I was blessed to meet Dr. Julia Mossbridge, and she introduced me to irons, and then it all happened with that. And it's because I was putting out this thought to the universe. I want my message to get out there in a way, because books are great, but I think if you go on a train these days, everybody's looking at their mobile phone. That's where the information is at. And if you want to have a big spiritual message, it's got to be online. It's what I admire what you're doing so much. It's amazing. If I had interview skills, I'd be doing that too and putting it online. I just get people to do their own videos. I don't talk to them online, I do think, and other areas of my life too, I think, but what's hard is when you have fears and doubts, isn't it? And they creep in and you think, am I worthy? Am I good? And it's usually not loving yourself enough. And loving yourself is the hardest thing in the world. I think that's the reason why a lot of us get blocks, is that we don't actually really believe and love in ourselves enough. And I think actually a book I would like to write is How to Love Yourself. I think everybody says you need to love yourself, but there's no guide. Right. Every religion says love that. How? If you don't, and you must have that with young children, some of them self-harming or whatever. You ask a child who's filled with self-hatred, as some young people are, how do they make that shift? How do they feel worthy? And it's taken me decades to get there. And I wish I could go back in time and know what I know now. That's, isn't it? They say youth is wasted on the young, don't they? Mm-hmm. I think so much of the things that went wrong in my life were lack of self-love. And that's where I think it starts. I think self-love is the foundation stone of spirituality. It sounds selfish, but it's not, because you can't give what you don't have. If you don't love yourself, how on earth can you give love to other people? That's my opinion again. And as I always say, I could well be very wrong.
And I love that about you, that you're like, could all be different. Well, I want to respect your time, and I want you to be able to either tell us about this most recent book or give us a part of your message you haven't felt like you've been able to give to us yet today, and kind of lead into where people should go to get more Theresa Cheung and how they find more about your message.
Well, I mean, the first place I'd love them to go, and also to find all the other people I've mentioned on this, is my Theresa Cheung author page on Facebook, which is a site that is monitored by me, but also a lot of other people now involved. I invite my readers to do posts. I invite experts on there to talk. I had the sensational Lloyd Auerbach on recently. He was talking about poltergeist, all these things. And you may think when you go on there, this is very eclectic, isn't it? But it's an open-minded page for everyone who's ever believed there's something more to this life than meets the eye. That's what it's for. If you're one of these people who think, this can't be it, we can't just be born, go about our life and die, and that's it. There has to be something more. That's what that page is for people who, you can be religious, you can not be religious, but you just think there's something more, and I'd like to find out more. And I hope that page is a great resource. There's also my website, where I've got an Afterlife Science page where you can read some more information about wonderful people like Dr. Julie Beischel, who I did an interview for with. She's in my book just come out, Heaven Called My Name. She's an amazing lady who has scientifically researched mediums and come to some startling conclusions. So that's another place. And also my book just out is called Heaven Called My Name. It's published by Little Brown Piatkas. And it is a collection of afterlife stories, but it's so much more than that. There's a bit of my autobiography there, where I talk quite frankly about doubt. And there's also a lot there about having a sense of calling. I do feel that some people, and I expect you're like that, Patrick, that whether you like it, sometimes you probably think, oh, I wish I wasn't so interested in this, but you feel called, connected to either religion or spirituality or the paranormal. And for me, they're all the same, those things. I don't see divisions. I hate those kind of divisions. I think the paranormal, spirituality, religion, if you're called to those things, why? Where'd that come from? What can you do with it? How can you transform it? And how can you use it in your life to better yourself and then others? And it's also a book about trying to answer this question, how can we love ourselves a bit more? Because almost all the letters I get, because you must, in my position, I also become a bit of an agony aunt that people write to me about other issues now. And every time I see it is lack of self-worth. And it's so sad. Why have people got to that state when they don't like themselves? You don't want to go the other extreme, of course, that you're a narcissist and whatever, I can think of someone very famous at the moment who is in that category. That is too much.
There's a giant elephant in the room here as we record.
Yes, but actually, maybe that's why. Hey, Patrick, maybe that's why. Maybe it's a message from above that we all need a little bit of that, to have the courage and to actually say what we think and what we feel, and to love ourselves as much as that person clearly adores it. Maybe it's to say, come on, love yourselves a bit more. Because when you love yourself, then I think the magic happens. Truly it does. And women especially struggle with that. I did warn you that. I think that is the magic ingredient, and I think should be the foundation stone of every religious movement and every spiritual movement. Because interestingly, a lot of people are drawn to spirituality because they don't feel enough. And letting them know that they are more than enough. I mean, we are all universes. We are all so beautifully complex. Even the evil in us is beautiful in a way. It's all part of who we are. We are amazing, all of us. We are miracles. Absolute miracles of DNA. There's only one of you. There's only one. There will never be anyone like us ever again. There'll be one Theresa, for example. I will never be repeated, thank goodness, I could say, but I will not be repeated. Even twins are different. What an amazing opportunity. So stop copying and following others, even people you admire, because you're not here to copy. Heaven wants you to be unique. Heaven wants you to make your own unique imprint. Stop copying and following. Even, as I say, if people follow me, I sometimes feel I've failed. I never, ever wanted people to follow me. I don't feel comfortable with that at all. It's not what I'm about, because my message, and I hope I can leave you with that, my message is be utterly unique. That's my message. There's so much to love about you, because there's nobody else here like you, and there never will be again. And heaven wants you not to copy religious leaders, celebrities, or anything. Heaven wants you to be you. And if you go to heaven, I think they will judge you not on how good you've been or how much you followed this or what you've done. They will judge you on how true were you to you. If you see what I mean. They will, how true were you? If I go there, how true were you to Theresa? You know, how true were you? No, I don't want to know whether you followed other people or you did this or you did that. Were you expressing the best that you can be?
No,
sorry, I'm getting carried away there.
That's good. I just have to tell you, there's so many questions on my list that I'd love to ask you. And, you know, with stuff going on in the world now, with all of your wisdom and your experiences. And so I just want to encourage listeners, if there's any question they didn't hear in this interview or anything that's weighing on them, you know, reach out to you and maybe ask you questions, send them their story. And really quick, if for someone who's just learning about Theresa Cheung, is there one book that maybe you would recommend they go to?
Well, The Afterlife is Real is the one that struck a chord, where I decided to present it like a court case. If you were in court, you know, where's the evidence? So that's how I did it. I did a unique take like that. So, okay, here's the evidence for and against. And I have a lot of powerful stories in there. But also 10 Secrets of Heaven is another one that I'm very proud of, where I was able to look at all the afterlife story accounts that I've had and come up with 10 themes. And they're not themes that you would expect. They are unusual themes that came out of these stories, and what these afterlife stories tell us about living a happier life on earth, and also what these afterlife stories tell us we can expect in heaven. So there are 10 secrets in there, and there is an interview in there with Dr. Eben Alexander and Anita Morjani, famous near-death experiences. And my current book, of course, I should mention that, Heaven Called My Name, which I am very, very proud of, because it's the first to officially mention science, and it's got a landing page there from the Institute of Noetic Sciences for readers to get free gifts from the likes of Dr. Dean Radin. And, you know, what more could you ask for? You know, you've got science meeting spirit, and I love that idea. Science meeting spirit. There's no gap from what I've seen. There isn't a gap. The gap is closing in fast, and I think that's the future. And I'd love to talk to more and more scientists about what they're doing, their amazing research into the paranormal. So I think that's it, really.
Okay. Well, we'll put a lot of those links into the show notes so people can click on them and get more.
Thank you.
You are wonderful, Theresa. Thank you so much for connecting with me today.
Thank you. I hope it cheered you up after Trump.
Yes, you did. You rock.
You're listening to the Big Seance podcast with Patrick Keller. Look for us on iTunes and be sure to check out bigseance.com for more discussion.
Welcome to Spectral Edition. I'm Tim Prasil. I gotta say, this article that I'm about to read is one of my favorites. It sounds almost like a very well-crafted short story. There are so many crisp, interesting details to it. It was published on July 30th of 1903 in the St. Paul Globe. The headline is, Ghost Haunts the College Library. Watchman declares invisible feet are heard in the corridors at night. Parkersburg, West Virginia, July 28th. The library of the West Virginia University is haunted. Ghostly visitations and spiritual manifestations have become so frequent of late that in the opinion of many staid residents of the vicinity, there is no use trying to conceal the fact any longer. The library is built on the site of an old cemetery, the bones and dust of former occupants having been removed to another resting place. There is a tradition among the old citizens that years ago, A Frenchman named Jean Mareschal lived on that vicinity and after dying mysteriously had been buried in the old cemetery. It is said that he had been banished from France by Marie Antoinette, and it is a fact that a certain volume on the French Revolution, once owned by the dead man, has shown marks of much usage lately, its pages and binding being found on more than one occasion damp in the mornings with fingerprints stained with clay upon the leaves as though but recently handled, and many persons believe that old Jean Marechal's spirit is now haunting the library built over his grave. Many persons have heard strange sounds and have seen strange sights during the midnight hour, but have heretofore been diffident to describe their experiences for fear of public derision. But H. Hoffman, the night watchman who weighs 250 pounds, has not been afraid to tell what he has seen and heard. His first knowledge that the library was being visited at unusual hours was gained about 2 weeks ago, when about midnight he heard the noise of footsteps ascending the stairs. He listened, opened the door, and followed. The footsteps receded toward the basement, and Hoffman hurried after them and turned on the light, but although he made a thorough search, he could find nothing. Neither could he find a place through which anyone could make his escape. He heard the noise a number of times, the sound of footsteps, rustling as of paper, and such a sound as would be made by the dropping of a book. But although all the doors were locked and the windows fastened down, he was unable to make the slightest discovery. One night, Hoffman heard the same sort of noise in the next room and rushed in to catch the mysterious visitor. He saw a face gazing at him from behind a pillar, and ran toward it, but it disappeared seemingly in the direction of the door and down the steps leading to the basement. The pursuer closed the door behind him and followed. Around the basement fled the nimble feet and up the stairs. Again, Hoffman saw the pale face and shadowy form. Carefully guarding the narrow passageway, he advanced. Near the door, the face turned full upon him. A low moan was heard, and all was silent. Nothing could be found on the stairway. On another night, Hoffman was startled by the sound of voices singing in the basement of the library. There seemed to him to be 100 singers singing with musical precision the measures of an old hymn. The notes and the time seemed familiar at the time, but afterward he was unable to give the hymn a name. The singing stopped when Hoffman entered the basement, but began again when he stood still, and on listening intently, he distinguished the words and tones of a man praying. Hoffman's inexplicable experience is backed up by the experience of quite a number of persons, none of whom can explain the mystery, except on the theory that old Jean Mareschal is haunting the library. I'm very much inspired to turn this into some kind of story, maybe a Vera Van Slyke story. I think this story needs Vera Van Slyke to come and solve whatever is going on with this thing. This is great. I'm Tim Prasil. You've been listening to Spectral Edition. I have close to 300 of these articles, not all as good as this one, but they're pretty interesting, and I post one each Wednesday on my website. The website is called The Merry Ghost Hunter. That's Merry, M-E-R-R-Y. I also post several of the previously released audio versions of Spectral Edition. You can find those there. The name, once again, The Merry Ghost Hunter, and I very much hope that you stop by sometime.
Thanks for joining us for the Big Seance podcast. We'd better get back to the table while there's still some candlelight left.
Some listener feedback this week. Here's an email I received from Sarah. Hi there, Patrick. I'm a big fan of your podcast and love listening. I just started going all the way back so I can make sure I've heard them all, and I caught something funny on your Amy Wilder episode. She said in the show that spirits often came through on messages or on voicemails, and she invited anyone to do so. If I'm hearing correctly, It sounds like there might be 2 EVPs on this podcast around 13 minutes and 46 seconds and 32 minutes and 34 seconds. They sound like female voices, maybe the sisters that reside there. I know you like to be skeptical about EVP, so I'm very excited to hear what you think and if you think they're the real deal. Thanks again, Sarah. So I responded to Sarah and thanked her for her email. I so remember that episode with Annie. It was one of the very first that I recorded for the podcast, and I just love Annie Wilder. But as part of my response, here's what I told Sarah. I can tell you that the 13-minute, 46-second mark is Annie greeting or saying goodbye to someone that was in the house with her as we were recording. So not paranormal. I remember debating on whether I would take that out or not. For the 32-minute, 34-second mark, my instinct is to say that this was just a sound produced by Annie's voice as she was talking, but I couldn't be 100% confident about that. But with activity known to be in her home involving the sisters, you just never know. But Sarah is so right. I am definitely fairly tough on EVP artifacts and most paranormal evidence, actually. I used to spend hours and hours doing surgery on audio from paranormal investigations or experiments looking for EVP. Nowadays, I'm doing a different kind of surgery when I produce and edit a podcast, and I never listen for EVP. I'm really kind of out of practice, but it does make you wonder how many EVP artifacts are in my episodes. But honestly, and this is just for you to know, keep in mind that by the time my podcast episodes reach your device or your computer, it's gone through quite a bit of processing and editing. So what you might hear could also end up being a byproduct of that. But you never know. In iTunes, I've received 2 reviews. One review from Podcast Lover 121, who calls their review Awesome Show, 5 stars, and says great show and great content with several exclamation points, I might add. Reviewer 3432 calls their feedback, I'm afraid of the dark, but not his podcast. And it's 5 stars. And that review says, from the couple I listened to, I've found more interesting than spooky, which I like. Did I mention I can only listen during the daytime? Oh, thank you too for your reviews. That's very kind of you. If you want to leave a review on iTunes, chances are, especially if you're nice to me, I'll read it on the show. Before I go, I want to give a really big shout out to my cuz, Randall Keller. Randy is an EVP researcher and is the author of Voices from Forever and There Is No Silence. If you've followed me from my blogging days, you for sure know about Randy. He was also my interview way back in episode 8 of the podcast a couple years ago. He's been very supportive of all things Big Seance, and he's had a great podcast for years, the Voices podcast, and he has tons of EVP. And I really hope his back catalog episodes are still available because you should definitely check them out. I've listened to every single one of them over the years. Well, many of us are sad because Randy says he's releasing one final episode of the Voices podcast, and I'm thinking that should be out soon, probably. You should go to his site and check everything out there. randallkeller.com. So that's RANDALL Keller, spelled like my last name, .com. You rock, Mr. Keller. I will definitely miss the podcast. Well, I hope you have a spectacular day or evening, and I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Let me know what you think. Send me some feedback, why don't you? Peace. That's for you, Randy. For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit bigseance.com. Just click on the Big Seance podcast logo or find it in the menu. You can also find and subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, TuneIn Radio, and iHeartRadio. Do you have any comments or feedback? Go to bigseance.com/feedback to learn how to get your voice in a future show. Or you can call my feedback line, 7755-TELL-ME. That's 775-583-5563. Interested in learning how to promote and share the podcast? Go to bigseance.com/share. Thank you so much for listening. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time.